Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our Q&A session for January 2025. I can't believe we're already entering into the second month of the year. It's a little crazy to me. This month, we are going to do 4 questions, and 2 of them are connected. So let's get started, shall we? First question comes from Maria. Is the communication with GMO plants possible? Okay. I like this question because it kind of forces us to think about what genetic modification means to the plant spirits, what it means to these living entities who are procreating and reproducing and being manipulated, right, into certain genetic directions. I have not put very much thought into this. I'm kind of just shooting from the hip here, but I will say this. The genetic expression of a plant, I don't think should matter, right? And I say that because the same thing applies to humans, right? Humans who have genetic differentiations are still fully people, fully capable of communication, fully valued as individuals. They're just different, right? And I know that the genetic differentiation in GMO plants is nefarious, right? It has like intent behind it and somebody did it in a lab, but I think the end result is still a living plant that has some connection to the green realm and some connection to the plant spirits all. The only frame of reference I really have for this, besides thinking about it in terms of humans with genetic differences, is houseplants, right? That a lot of the houseplants that we have been bred and manipulated and to be who they are. And people, including myself, have had very powerful experiences with them, right? They're still alive. And it's not possible, especially when we look at the ancient perspectives of self-structure, meaning what the self is, who we are on a spirit level, a soul-based level, including the physical body. It's not possible for something or someone to be alive and not have the aspects of self that are self, right? Things can't be alive and also be dead. So if a plant is alive, even if genetically modified, I think fully capable and of communication. And I think that that looks like exactly the same way it looks with every other plant. And maybe they have some interesting things to share with us. Maybe they have some perspectives that we could really use. You know, they have seen things and experienced things that might be very valuable for those of us trying to do this work. So not only do I wholeheartedly believe they are capable of communication, I think it's probably wise if you have the opportunity to sit with those kinds of plants to do that and see what they have to say. So, good question. Next from Heather, even though I'm a visual person, I have been struggling with focusing enough to feel confident in my protections and cleansing during daily ritual. Any advice from a plant spirit perspective? Okay, so I'm also very visual, and I totally sympathize with this particular question. And I will say this. I can't do this kind of work in one hand or in another hand and not both hands. So for me, one hand would be like a purely visual experience, a purely visual practice, using the imaginal faculties to see, imagine, make believe, pretend, visualize something happening, understanding that that's creating a change or a flux in energetic flow. The other side of it being purely ritualistic, where I'm doing physical actions, hoping that those actions lead to some kind of transformative effect in space, right? I really believe wholeheartedly that we have to do both. And we see this in all of the magical traditions that exist, right? That a ritual without vision can be very shallow, and vision without ritual can be very cerebral and kind of spin out. So if I understand your question and if I'm able to answer it from personal experience, I think that the combination of ritual actions around cleansing and purifying space coupled with visualizing or seeing, or for more feeling people, feeling or experiencing those ritual actions having an effect. So, for example, when I pray to the deities that I work with, right, we have an established format of warding and purifying a space, and that involves the kindling of a need fire, the kindling of a candle or a sacred flame to bring light and protection to the space. And that flame is either circumambulated, or in small spaces, the flame itself is actually moved in a circle around the space. And so that's the ritual part, right? I understand that the fire is bringing light, is bringing warmth, is creating this bubble of energy around me. But I also, while I'm reciting the charm, the galder, the spoken part of it, I also try to see and feel the room change, right? To see and feel that hedge of protection, or the presence of the deities step in, or whatever the case is, right? Another example could be for work in clinical practice, right? Sometimes I will smolder a little bit of juniper, which is a plant that I work with a lot for creating auspicious and sacred space. So the ritual part of it is connecting with juniper, asking for them to please purify and bless the space, right? Always leading with prayer, always leading with an ask, sharing a couple of breaths with the plant, lighting the plant, extinguishing it, and maybe moving around the space or wafting the smoke, or whatever. That's the ritual part of it. And then I'm also, again, trying to see that smoke, wiping the space clean, wiping the client clean, wiping me clean, and filling and saturating the room with good energy, right? With peace and prosperity and wisdom and all that good stuff. So, I don't know, hopefully that's helpful. If not, bring it up in the chat and we'll do a part 2 next month, or we'll do a part 2 on Patreon. Okay. By the way, these questions all come from people on our Patreon group. We have 3 levels on Patreon, starting at $3 a month, where you can contribute to my work. It goes up from there to a maximum of $18, where you get access to every bit of content that I make. So if you're interested in engaging this way and having this kind of community, come over to Patreon. There's also a free level, and you can kind of just be a voyeur and see what we're doing. So in the conversation around that question, Jake then added his question, which was relevant, and I really liked kind of where it went. And Jake asked, wondering how to improve my subtle psychic skills so that I can feel confident in both plant spirit communication and sensing and directing energies in my magical practice to power my workings, protections, cleansing, right? So he takes it back a step further, which I think is important, that when I talk about visualizing the space change or seeing the room become clear, what if that's challenging, right? And for me, really was. I'm a very physically visual person and very cerebral, but when it came to activating that imaginal sense, very, very hard for me. So here's one little pro tip that sometimes is helpful if we just change the language around something and we realize, oh, I was just overthinking it, or I was tying it up too tight. And then maybe I can give you some suggestions. And that first part is, don't be afraid to use words and thoughts and approaches like make-believe, imagination, pretend, visualization, inner vision, right? All of those words are accurate. Pretend, make-believe, imagination, it doesn't imply falsehood, right? It implies engaging with non-ordinary senses. And we do that as kids effortlessly. So it's in there, the muscle memory's in there, we just have to flex it. So for me, realizing that the thing that I needed to be doing was imagination, I was like, oh, okay, so it's not this like super obscure thing. It's this thing that I know how to do because it's a sense we all have, right? And from imagination, from activating that imaginal sense, everything else tonifies and gets strengthened. So change the language can be helpful for some people. The other part of it is practice, 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 practice. Okay, so one kind of silly thing that we used to do in a working group that I was involved in the 90s, we would try to imagine something in the center of the room that wasn't there. And we would sit with it for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, trying to let it become as real as we possibly could individually. And of course, the collective experience, the collective egregore is also helpful, but you can do it alone. So you can spend time, every day staring at a blank space in the room that you're in and trying to imagine, an elephant being there, or a plant being there, or something else. You can go on a walk around the block or go for a hike and imagine that you have an owl or a wolf walking with you, and try to allow the presence of that imaginal being to be as real as possible, and just flex, right? Just work out. I know it seems silly, but those are the muscles we're trying to activate here. And when we get good at imagining there's a giant pink elephant in the center of the room, we can then very easily imagine that as the smoke of juniper permeates a space, that the energy of the space is changing, that the thick, sticky, dark energy we're feeling is pushed away and is replaced with something else. And visually that's happening, but also we hope there's something in the heart happening, that we feel different, right? That the room feels different. And once a person, by the by, has these basics down, and you feel good at it, you feel like competent, right? We always can be getting better. Like I always see myself like, oh, I can be getting better at this. I don't think there's any mastery in this work, is what I'm saying. We can, from there, really start to drop into the subtlety of things, right? And to say like, wow, how does the room feel before and after? And if you're not really picking up on a big difference before and after, then that's an invitation to work harder, train harder, right? And it could be 5 minutes a day, and it could be fun, and it could be pretendy and imaginal, and I think that's cool. If you get too heavy with it, it starts to become not fun, and your brain will resist, right? Like we already work hard in our life, so it is work, but try to make it fun. So same thing, we can continue this discussion over on Patreon, but hopefully that's some talking points that we can start with. The last thing that we will cover this month is from Lanny. Maybe, let's see. There are differences in the way you approach your relationship with plants you grow yourself versus those in the wild, right? This is a fantastic question. Let me preface this by saying there are no dumb questions. Okay. Some of the things that we think are so basic and so pedestrian, it's the first time somebody else has ever heard of it or thought of it, or the asking of that question breaks somebody's hypnosis, right? It breaks the bubble and it kind of like opens up their consciousness, right? So no dumb questions. I will talk about the same entry-level basic stuff over and over and over and over again, but this is not that. I think thinking this far ahead and thinking in terms of the difference in approaching plants that we are stewarding, that we are growing intentionally in a garden or a pot, and those that grow on their own accord with their own sovereignty in the wild, and then how the relationships might be different, is very smart. We really should approach both of them with the same level of respect, right? Always coming with a gift and with humility and with love and respect. But wild spaces are wild spaces, right? So we will always feel more relaxed, more at ease, maybe more confident, maybe a little more cocky in our garden, in our homes with our house plants, right? Because we have some control in those spaces. We have some familiarity there. We have some sovereignty. maybe we feel more safe there, or we're in control of if someone else can, sneak up on us or something. So there's always going to be a little more of a free-spirited energy in those spaces. In the wild, we always have to remember that we're a guest, right? That when we walk into those spaces, we're moving into an area that we might be in for half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, but there are beings who live there 24/7, 365. The other thing I think about with wild spaces is that the plants aren't the only people there that might require a nod of respect, right? You're going to have the animals, you're going to have the Ilfa, the Fae, different land spirits who might need to be acknowledged and honored. So hopefully we're in good relationship with our, grow your own plant spaces, that we're always being mindful of the animals and the spirits of place. We're making regular offerings to the spirits of place. And so there's a little more of a casual, friendly kinship there. The wild spaces we definitely have to step into with a little more caution, a little more awareness. And I think that's good. One really good book recommendation that I can give right now is the Demons and Spirits of Place. I think it's what that's called, by Claude Lecouteux. Of course, I'll put that down in the comments below. So fantastic questions, everybody. Thank you so much for these. It's always such a great way for us to connect each month. And oftentimes we continue this conversation back on Patreon or down in the comments below. So if you have something to share, if you have a perspective or something you want to share or ask, drop down in the comments. We'll see what happens. Take care, guys. Happy New Year.